railroading can be an art, but can it be a science? Bruce Chubb, the builder of the Sunset Valley, is an electrical engineer. I wonder if that's why he thinks of model railroading as a science. Bruce.
Hello there, Alan.
Hi.
Welcome to the Sunset Valley system.
Thank you. Frank Ellison influenced you a great deal, so much that you modeled many of his towns. He considered model railroading an art, yet you consider it a science.
Well, I guess since Frank Ellison's time, a lot of science has come into the hobby from the standpoint of the computers, your command control, a lot of the electronics. But really the main science I like is the actual simulation of a real railroad.
The HO Sunset Valley has hand-laid Code 100 nickel-silver track. Most of the turnouts are number 6 and number 8. The minimum radius is 28 inches. Bruce began work on the layout in 1955. It was fully signaled in 1966. The layout features the CTC-16 command control system. The main layout room is 12.5 feet by 27.5 feet. The smaller room containing the city of Fillmore is 28 by 6 feet. Bruce, can we start our tour here at the Fillmore Engine Facility?
Right, Alan. That's a good place to start the tour. This is kind of a beehive hub of activity where all the motive power is provided for the system. You've got a turntable here, your steam facilities, older facilities here, and your more modern diesel facilities here. This is the city of Fillmore. It's the southern end of the Sunset Valley system. The yard area is about 28 feet long, 17 tracks wide. It's a freight yard over in this portion. Then this portion over here is the passenger yard.
Yeah.
Here's our main passenger terminal building up here, servicing your platforms underneath. We have a switching, yard switchers work off this end, and then on the far end we have the suburb of Park Ridge. Alan, as the trains leave Fillmore area, they come out through the tunnel into the basement bathroom at the town of Pottersville, which is a commuter stop shown here. Then they move across that lift-out section and go through DeVerne Junction, which is another commuter stop, and actually where the main line begins on the Sunset Valley system, they continue out through that tunnel into the main room. Coming out of this tunnel, Alan, we enter the major industrial town of East Fork with a long passing siding, crossover in the center, many industrial spurs serving the different industries. The East Fork Station is located there in the center of town with its long passenger platforms. Then coming through here, we get to our next community, which is the community of Edsport, named in memory of my father-in-law. It gives a wharf scene here with a lot of added detail to the system, as well as it provides a convenient point for a freight car set-out. From Edsport, then, we go over there to Prairie Crossing.
Which is behind Walnut Hill.
Right. Prairie Crossing is a typical Midwestern town modeled in the 1950s from its grain elevators, Purina Chow's building, and the local farm. Coming out of a tunnel here, we enter the southwestern part of the railroad, which is the town of San Clemente. It's got a major passing siding, a house track on the front end. The tracks here go back to a hidden staging yard, which we call Newburgh, and it's a 4-track staging yard which simulates the interchange with the Santa Fe. Here we have Snake Creek, which represents the eastern West Virginia part of the country. Major industries here is the Ed's Brewery, a logging operation, and the center of the activity being the Laurel Hill Mining Company. Here we have the town of Walnut Hill, Alan. It's one of the major towns on the system. It sports the longest passing siding on the line, has many industries, lots of industry spurs, lots of switching, and 2 interchange tracks. This is the end of a line, Alan, at Dunsmuir Summit Yard, where we have the yard section house, the yard structures, then the yard tracks themselves.
Is the Sunset Valley strictly an imagined layout?
Yes, it is, Alan. It's basically following somewhat the Southern Pacific prototype, but it's really an imagined railroad that's been built freelance.
That goes from sea to shining sea, kind of.
Right. It's very important, I feel, in any model railroad to make it emulate the prototype, whether it be a small logging operation or a complete empire. Following a prototype is what we're really after in the hobby. So it's mainly your color schemes, setting them up in a prototype manner, the actual way you handle your industrial sidings and the switching possibilities, your yards, your engine facilities. How to operate the railroad in a prototype manner is really the major theme that I'm after. And what I'm trying to capture is a complete transportation system where you've modeled everything in kind of super detail from the interior of a building up through the operation of the railroad itself.
Mm-hmm. Why do you favor fast time?
Well, I think that fast time helps us make our railroads appear larger than they really are, from a standpoint that you're actually multiplying your distance by your time ratio. When you actually set out a boxcar or move from one town to another, you're actually taking more time, so it makes it appear like a bigger railroad that you're working. I started out using 13-to-1, and I've backed down through the years, now down to 8-to-1. And basically it gives a 24-hour operation and a 3-hour evening. We get together here every 3 weeks to operate my system, and I do some running in between. And one thing, you don't need a large group to have prototype operation. By yourself, you can operate your railroad in a prototype manner and have good operation without a group. But a group helps you simulate all the different facets of railroad operation in a simultaneous manner.
Everyone knows that you're interested in electronics. Did your interest in operation lead you to develop all these sophisticated control systems that you use on the railroad, or was it vice versa, or how did the two complement each other?
Well, I guess my main thrust has been in the operation, and to make it as realistic as possible, the electronics is a tool that helps you do that. And it helps you have the computer do tasks and the command control do tasks which aren't prototypical in themselves. So you can have that be done for you with the aid of electronics. For example, with a block detector or a block system,
mm-hmm.
you can actually have a computer or the command control automatically assign block power, which aids a lot in the realism.
Yeah, you did that for a while. You had it that way, and then you changed over to the CTC 16 system.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And does the computer print waybills for you, too? Or
yes, the computer prints waybills for each of our freight car movements.
And so you'll get a switching list at the beginning of each operating session for each train that's going to run, and make up your trains based on what the computer has generated. Is that done in some sort of random fashion, or how is that programmed in?
Mm-hmm. It's a random number generators, and actually in the computer is stored each data on every car and the data on each of the industries as far as what cars that industry needs, what unloading times typically are. So it selects all the movements based on prototype background, but in a sort of random manner. I guess the main thing I like to do is to balance the overall railroad system. I love every aspect, so I go quite strong in electronics, but I also like super detailing scenery. I like scratch building structures. I like all features, and trying to keep them all balanced to give you a balanced transportation system is the main thrust that I try to follow.
You have so many so much electronic gear under your layout. It's hard to imagine. What is there? Maybe.
Well, I guess I've always told visitors that there's as much underneath the railroad as there is on top. And if you look underneath, that's somewhat true. From a standpoint, underneath you have the switch motors for controlling your switches. You've got electromagnets for your uncoupling. You've got all the terminal blocks for your signal system. Got about 69,000 feet of wire in the system. Got all the circuit boards for interface to the computer itself, the command stations, the power stations. We're putting in radio control for the throttles. And so all that's going under the table. So when you get done, you have as much super detail under the table as you do on top.
The layout is really a part of your family. Your life is centered around it, and your family's life, the whole thing, it ties together. Tell us a little bit about that.
I got photographs, for example, of my father-in-law and myself working on detail out on our back porch, and he's passed on. Now my son-in-law is in the same position working with me on the railroad, and so I guess we can mark the whole family history of each person's contribution to the railroad and what part they've played. And has been a big source of family unity and all working together on the project.
What about Al Kalmbach? You used his book quite a bit, and in fact, you memorized it, from what I understand.
Well, I did memorize Al Kalmbach's book, and it did play a very important part from a standpoint. His book was How to Operate a Model Railroad. And I followed that and actually ended up with the book here, which is a modern version of that same book, which we wrote on how to operate your model railroad.
Could you sum up for us what you've learned from building and operating the railroad?
The major thing, I think, is all the different facets that you can get into. You can, whatever area you want to specialize in, from the artistic to the electronics to the operation to the carpentry to painting, and there's anything you want to do, you can find it in model railroading.
Bruce, the Sunset Valley certainly captures the feeling of a real railroad in miniature. Thank you.
You're welcome, Alan, and that's the theme I've been after for all my life, to try to get a real live transportation system in miniature.
Well, you've accomplished it. Thank you.
Thank you for a visit.